Truman Eldridge, first settler of Roseville, was born April 24, 1808, at the town of Hancock, Berkshire County, Massachusetts, near the western state line between Massachusetts and New York State. His ancestors came from England in the 1630s. Truman had 5 brothers and 3 sisters. Only Truman and his younger brother, Norman, came to Illinois. Norman Eldridge, born May 8, 1815, is the great-great-grandfather of Dick Walker of Roseville. Truman Eldridge, in his early years, remained at his parents' home in Massachusetts, working on his father's farm and attending public school. Truman Eldridge left home at age 21 years and started out on for himself, laying stone walls and in any work to make a living. Before Truman left home, when he was 20 years old, he started teaching school during the winter and continued teaching for 5 seasons. In 1833, Truman started a partnership in a country store with Erastus Brown of North Steventown, Rensselaer County, New York. This town being just across the state line from Hancock, Berkshire County, Massachusetts, where Truman grew up. In 1836, Truman sold his interest in the country store. In the summer of 1836, Truman decided to head west. He was 28 years old, single, ambitious, and wanted to see for himself the land he had heard stories of. Why he came to western Illinois may have been the military tract land, even though he hadn't been a soldier. Tract land consisted of over 3.5 million acres of land in west central Illinois, between the Illinois River and Mississippi River, and extended north to the mouth of the Rock River. 2/3 of the acreage was set aside as bounty land for enlisted veterans of the War of 1812. Congress provided for 160 acres called patents and signed by President James Monroe in 1818 to be given to privates and corporals. Non-commissioned officers were to receive 320 acres. When Truman arrived in the area, he traveled from one home to another of the few houses in the country area gathering information. He also stayed with some friends he had made near what is now Swan Creek, 4.5 miles south of Hat Grove. The friends he stayed with in 1836 may have been Joseph Radican family, who had bought 2 quarter sections in 1835, which already had a double cabin on it. Truman took up a claim of 240 acres of land in Section 30 of Roseville Township, 1 mile southwest of what was then known as Hat Grove. Truman had to go to the Quincy, Illinois, where the federal land office was, to take up his claim of 240 acres, paying somewhere from 62.5 cents per acre to $1.25 per acre. He stayed in the Warren County area 3 months, then returned to South Williamstown, Berkshire County, Massachusetts, and engaged in mercantile business, which he followed for about 2 years, until the 1st of September of 1838. He then prepared to return to Warren County, Illinois, determined to make this his permanent home. In the fall of 1838, Truman Eldridge started for Illinois, traveling from Hancock to Troy, New York, by wagon. Here he took the Erie Canal to Buffalo. From Buffalo to Cleveland, he traveled by steamboat. From there he went down the Ohio Canal to Portsmouth, Ohio, where he reached the Ohio River. Here he took a flatboat to Cincinnati, as there was no steamboats on that part of Ohio at that time. It took them 8 days to make the trip from Portsmouth to Cincinnati, a distance of perhaps 100 miles. At Cincinnati, Mr. Eldridge took a small stern-wheeler steamboat for St. Louis. The river was very low, and the boat frequently ran aground on a sandbar, often remaining several hours before being released. They finally reached St. Louis 20 days after leaving Cincinnati. At St. Louis, he took an upward-bound steamer for Quokka. This trip consumed 10 days, 4 of which it took to cross the rapids between Keokuk and Fort Madison. On the Illinois side, opposite Burlington, Mr. Eldridge had his goods unloaded and stored them in the camp of some wood choppers, where they remained for several days, when he succeeded in getting a man from La Harpe to haul his plunder, as it was then called, to Swan Creek, where Truman put up with some of friends he had met on his first trip in '36. It was a late summer when he arrived in Swan Creek. This winter of 1938-39 was Truman's Eldridge's first prairie winter. The frozen ground made travel easier than in early spring. There were very few places to go, however, since Warren County was not thickly settled at the time. Truman Eldridge bought 40 acres of timber ground 2 miles northeast of Swan Creek in Section 17 from a Samuel Patterson. Before winter got a strong grip on the country, Mr. Eldridge, with the help of his new friends, started cutting timber from his newly acquired 40 acres for his own home. They chose straight walnut trees for the most part, cut and hewed them so they could season during the winter. The lumber for Mr. Eldridge's cabin had to be hauled 4 miles north to his farm site located across the highway from the present Eldridge Park at the north edge of the city of Roseville. On April 2nd, 1839, he raised a building which was 24 by 24 and 1.5 stories high. It was a fine home for the time, located at the top of a knoll overlooking his land. His home became an inn for travelers and the first post office in Hat Grove. The post office came into existence around 1842. Mr. Eldridge was married to Miss Alma Jones January 12, 1839 at Chaka Khan in what is now Henderson County, at the cabin of a friend, Major Rose. Miss Jones was a native of Steventown of Rensselaer County, New York. They were acquainted previous to the time of coming west. She had friends at Berry, Illinois, and Pike County, and had come to Illinois in 1836. Mr. Eldridge came from Swan Creek shortly after his marriage and in the spring of 1839 and settled in his present place. The first year he broke out sod enough using oxen to sow about 5 acres of oats and planted a little corn. He did not raise any grain for market for some years, but when he did, the nearest market was Aquawka, to which place they hauled the grain in wagons. At the time he settled here, his nearest neighbor was Thomas Reed, who lived near the timber on the south. There were none on the north, nearer than Monmouth. Mr. Eldridge made the first settlement on the prairie. When Mr. Eldridge settled here, there was a road, or trail it was called, running from Beardstown to Monmouth through Roseville, which was then and for several years after called Hat Grove. The county built a bridge over the creek north of his place, and the county commissioners laid out a road intersecting this one at right angle across the county. This road ran from Peoria to Burlington. Mr. Eldridge was appointed as the first postmaster at Hat Grove and served in that capacity for 12 years. He also farmed and was proprietor of Roseville Steam Flouring Mill. While serving as first postmaster of this place, then known as Hat Grove, Truman Eldridge recommended that the name be changed to Roseville in honor of his friend Major Rose, in whose house at Chaka Khan he had married Miss Alma Jones, January 21, 1839. The reason for this recommendation stemmed from the fact that there was a place in the state called Hart's Grove, and the mail address to both places was often confused and sent to the wrong address. However, the town was officially called Hat Grove in January 1850, so that the recommendation did not occur until 1851 or 52. Within the next few years, a recommendation was accepted by the Post Office Department at Washington, and thereafter all mail addressed to this place was done so under the name Roseville. This change probably did not take place under the postmastership of Mr. Eldridge, but rather under his successor, Benjamin Morford. In 1820, Leonard Ross deeded 2/4 sections to William Ross and a Rufus Brown, both men from Steventown, Rensselaer County, New York, the 2/4 sections of land being the future site of Atlas, Illinois, in Pike County, south of the future site of Quincy, Illinois. William Ross and Rufus Brown would later be the founders of Atlas, Illinois. After coming to Illinois in 1820 to claim their land, Ross and Brown returned to Steventown, New York, to close their affairs. In 1821, Ross and Rufus Brown returned to Illinois, along with a Jeremiah Rose and his wife and their young daughter, Jeremiah Rose, later to be known as Major Rose. Jeremiah Rose was born 1792 in Steventown, New York, raised on his father's farm. In 1815, he married Miss Margaret Brown, also of Steventown, New York. Margaret Brown was born in 1794. Margaret Brown was a sister of Rufus Brown and also a sister of Rastus Brown, who was a partner in a country store in North Steventown, New York, with Truman Eldridge in 1833. In the fall of 1821, Jeremiah Rose moved to Atlas, Illinois, Pike County, with his wife and young daughter. In 1822, Jeremiah made a partnership with a John Wood to build a log cabin at the site of a portion of the future site of Quincy, Illinois. In 1850, Major Rose and family moved back to Quincy. Major Rose died in 1860 at the age of 68. Truman Eldridge died February 25, 1906, at the age of 97, the oldest resident in Warren County at that time. His wife, Alma Jones Eldridge, died August 19, 1900, at the age of 92. Truman Eldridge's inheritance was left to his daughter, Irene Eldridge Smith, widow of Edwin R. Smith of Monmouth. He died in 1867. Norman Eldridge, brother of Truman, came to Hat Grove, Roseville, in 1846. Norman Eldridge bought 160 acres in Ellison Township, just west of Truman's 240 acres. The two-story house Norman built about 1870 on the 160 acres, southeast quarter section 25 of Ellison Township, still stands across the road north of the new fire station west of Roseville.